we're talking about the Environomicon. I've been asked by many people, what do you mean by the term the Environomicon? Well, obviously it is a pun on the concept of the Necronomicon by the American writer H.P. Lovecraft, in which he developed a pantheon of entities and what I believe to be a pantheon of pagan gods for a new American and a new Western technological society. The whole pantheon is contained not only within these gods and their varying attributes of what they are, what they can do, and what they can represent, but is also intrinsically connected to places in New England, both real and fictional, such as Innsmouth, Dunwich, Providence, and many other places mentioned in the stories, both real and fictional. In other words, Lovecraft is energizing the landscape not only in terms of real names and real places that exist, but also augmenting these places with imaginary places where magical things can happen in order to open up a portal into an altered reality. Therefore, the mundane nature of a city, a town, a landscape, a vista, regardless of where it is or how it looks, serves a function greater than sensations caused upon the nervous system, on our five senses, by everything from the blowing of the wind to the smell of the seashore. There is something more. It becomes a lexicon of imagination, and beyond this imagination there lies something remarkable. The vessel which holds within it not only concepts that may be associated through folklore or scandals or murders or things that happened, battles, etc. within the landscape, but with something that you can infuse upon them. And this becomes a very powerful way of developing your imagination and also your ability to see things greatly within metaphor and allegory. A good example of this would be to have seen faces in trees. That famous line in Stephen King's novel Salem's Lot, where the school teacher's in a conversation with his old boss. He asks his old boss, do you believe that there's a soul and that the personality can move beyond physical death? And his old boss says, well, I've seen trees that do look like tortured spirits. Well, it's that kind of idea. You might see a simulacrum. You might have these effects triggered by the flowing waters in a river. You might have these abilities taken into you in terms of a sensation, both beautiful and sometimes sinister, when entering into one of these landscapes. You can energize them in a very beautiful way, or you can use them to explore your own subconscious mind. For example, a deep dark forest is an ideal location in which to explore the recesses of your consciousness. Why are you slightly nervous in a certain spot? Why does the oncoming darkness in particular worry you? And being trapped in such a place with no means of getting out in terms of having a flashlight and so on. Why do you feel a sense of relief if you hear the noise of cars in the distance on a road or see the lights of a town in the distance? Why does that sense of relief come in there? It's because there are certain elements within that deep forest that you have no control over, that you have no ability to take on directly, whether it be a fall from an accident, being attacked by a wild animal, getting lost and being affected or damaged or even killed by something like hypothermia. But these things are not certainties, and the fears they generate, the anxieties they generate within us, then become encapsulated in the form of entities, beings, spirits, phantoms that exist within the dark recesses of the forest. Try to put yourself in the position of the New England Puritans who first came to the Americas. The demarcation line between the end of their property and what lay beyond, beautifully illustrated in the movie The Witch. That demarcation line between the Sylvian terrors and your modernity and salvation is probably the most powerful frontier that exists as humans can experience it. Therefore, our ancient ancestors and not so ancient ancestors who may live on the outskirts of forests will hear noises that are strange within the forest, and their imagination fills in the blanks, often with negative things. You can also find yourself in the forest and see it as your key or tools to salvation, to ways of escaping not only the dangers inherent in the forest, but also the fears and phobias that you bring there if you become lost or trapped. Remember, that's an enormous charge within your nervous system. If you can harness that charge and apply it towards your creative works, well then you can produce within yourself an expanded nervous system that goes beyond the space-time parameters and confines normally held within us. Your intuition becomes better. This is how street smarts develops. Street smarts are an excellent example of the Environomicon within an urban setting. You develop street smarts. You know what street not to go down after dark. You may see a group of people ahead of you. You may not want to engage or encounter with them. You may want to act aloof and walk past them and not allow yourself to make eye contact. You may have a look at a certain neighborhood and say, this is not for me. Well, that's an example of the Environomicon. To take this one step further, I would suggest that there is no such thing as a boring or an uninteresting landscape. Merely, this is a canvas on which you can apply greater senses of meaning. For example, you can, within your mind, see something like your daily commute to work, being surrounded by certain individuals what you might find normally tiresome and obnoxious, even threatening. Moving beyond them and getting home, you could see yourself as having survived something of a quest. Therefore, the mundane is transformed into the magical. And by applying this, and we've seen this all through literature in the work of writers such as James Joyce or Hubert Selby Jr., where the average world, and often the dark world, is transformed into something that gives a sense of elevation of the spirit. Because the landscape, the characters in it, and your engagement within it is transformed outside the domain of the mundane and the obvious and into a world of imagination. You can rename certain characters who annoy you as goblins or something along those lines. You will find that you will create a world within the Environomicon that you control and not the exterior influences contained within that environment imposing itself upon you, creating a constant sense of anxiety and concern. You become like a reed in a river and you flow with the river rather than being caught on the bank, waiting to stagnate and fall to the bottom to rot.
How to rescue people?
How to rescue people? Well, you have to rescue yourself, really.